Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for us to get back in, and I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. Hope you all enjoyed funky pies and compassion creamery, which were very delicious. But now I am very honoured to be introducing these two young ladies this afternoon. So we have Emma Hurst and Amanda Dorn, of course, from Animal Justice Party. So we have the Honourable Emma Hurst and the Honourable Amanda Dorn. Emma is the first female Animal Justice Party MP elected to New South Wales Parliament. She has worked tirelessly for the rights of animals for many years, and with a background in campaigning, political lobbying and media work, Emma has secured over $60 million in government funding for animal protection.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And equally as awesome is Amanda Dorn, who is the first Animal Justice Party representative in Western Australia. So Amanda is leading a growing movement that believes kindness should be at the heart of every policy for animals, people and the planet. So their talk today will cover recent developments for the Animal Justice Party in both New South Wales and WA. Please make these two rock stars really welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're off.
Awesome. All right. So the Animal Justice Party. I'm not too sure. Oh, there we go. So the Animal Justice Party, and here we are. So I'm not too sure how many people are members here, and perhaps we can have a show. Fantastic. I think Bruce Poon wanted me to promote at the end of the day at 4 o'clock. We are having an AJP meeting in this room here, so it'd be great to have everybody, all the members, come along. But let's launch into this. The AJP, like from greyhound racing and puppy farming to live export and banning factory farming, animal cruelty, it's widespread in Australia, and we want to end animal cruelty to all animals. We're the only political party in Australia dedicated to ending animal cruelty. Poll after poll shows that Australians want it to end, and that's how the party was established in 2009 through public support for a party like us to exist. It's a movement that's turning compassion into laws. A revolution in kindness is what I'd like to see, and that's what I'm advocating. That's what the party is advocating for, and I'm advocating for that to be on T-shirts next. Our role is to give a political voice in Parliament to animals, to those that have none. We pursue vital issues of animal protection through the Parliament system, actively contesting every election. Hence, we got elected in 2025, and it just really showed that that's where voter support is actually going. We've contested, we've worked hard, and we got in, which was fantastic to follow what Emma and what Georgie are doing. Lobbying government and all other political parties for animal-friendly policies, strengthening those relationships of people who is in Parliament at the moment. The Greens have the balance of power in WA in the upper house, and so we've got the 4 Greens and myself. They're our powerful allies, and they really, we work together and they support everything that obviously that we're doing as a party, and we support them. But it's also, winning over and trying to find common ground with all the other parliamentarians. Like the Liberals, there's common ground with everybody. Everybody does have a companion animal, even, the One Nation people, and, even the Nationals. They've got pets. And we found some common ground with our pets, and that was quite nice. I don't know if they'll vote with me yet, but that's, well, they did actually for Medicare, but I'll get to that. Our core values are kindness, equality, rationality, and non-violence. We're a science-based and a solutions-based political party, and that's what I love about the party, because it's built in science and solutions-focused. We want to end factory farming, but we also want to transition slaughterhouse workers into non-harming industries and to really lift those people and to give them a more satisfying job than working in a slaughterhouse. I mean, look at the people that are actually being employed in those industries. So we're a compassionate political party that support people, we're animals, people and the planet. We recognise the connection between animals, people and the planet. The difference between our policies and our positions, a position statement first of all, our policy is what we fight for in Parliament, which is literally all of our animal issues. That's our core business. The focus will always stay on animals. But we have position statements on everything. First Nations people, conflict and war, cannabis, corruption, democracy, asylum seekers, gender equality, pro-choice, with abortion rights, homelessness, housing. So these are position statements, and this is why the party is just such a progressive, youthful party, because we're animals, people and the planet. And this is what we're trying to drive home, and what we're trying to have everybody recognise, that we're not just a single issue party. We're animals, people and the planet. And these are the position statements. And this is where we can actually win people over with that. And this is where we find our common ground, because we have a position statement on whatever is important to them. But our policies and what we are working and striving for is to end animal cruelty. Ending factory farming. Once I actually removed my own short-sightedness and the ignorance, and I stopped ignoring what was happening within the animal agriculture industry. This is why I really joined the Animal Justice Party, was to end factory farming. Once I really saw the devastation and watching the Dominion, Lucent, watching Forks Over Knives, watching all those documentaries, it was really Earthlings that was really what I became vegan. I realised the leather couch that I was sitting on was the same as, I just made that connection, and that was really powerful, and then I've never looked back. Banning live export. We still think that 2028, it's still too far away, but, you know, that's where we're at. Western Australia, it's, you know, a lot of sheep farmers. There's a lot of resistance to that. You know, there was the Keep the Sheep campaign that throughout the election, a lot of people thought they were a political party. They acted like one, but they're not. They're just lobbyists for the ag industry. We want to prevent future pandemics, closing down wet markets, create a healthy food system, championing causes like Greener by Default and the Plant-Based Treaty as well, and really showing people that, you know, if they can't go vegan, if not being vegan for ethical reasons, well, health reasons. People will always look at what's important to them, their own personal self-interest, and if that's for their health, go vegan for their health, well then perfect, that's fine. It doesn't matter how we all get there, as long as we actually do get there. Animals, people on the planet are declaring a climate emergency. This is standing up against all causes of climate change and bringing to the chamber, talking about in Parliament, the negative impact of the animal agriculture industry and what that is having on the climate. And, you know, not even the Greens were talking about that. They talk about your deforestation and whatnot, and of course all these issues are incredibly, very important. But it's the animal agriculture industry, and that's so critical on what we're actually talking about within Parliament. Protecting our reefs, supporting farmers, putting planet over profit, banning practices that harm our reef, and banning new mines and gas wells, fracking in the Kimberley. That's a huge one that's coming up at the moment at the very northern of Western Australia. And that's what we're banning, that's what we're fighting for, actually, to not have them start industrialising northern Western Australia and the Kimberley. That would absolutely be devastating. We're the only political party that take into account, as I said, all emissions which farmed animals. Their methane emissions account for 70% of agricultural emissions. There's no other political parties, as I said, are willing to take action on this. And the AJP were instrumental in initiating the Climate Rescue Accord, uniting minor parties and independents behind a shared, ambitious climate agenda. And our elected MPs. It started with Mark Pearson and then Andy Medic, and here we have Emma and Georgie Purcell doing incredible things. And we're all very different in our approach, I think, but it seems to resonate with people. The South Australian election, I hope that we get Lionel elected. That would just be incredible. And there's elections coming up Emma's to get Emma re-elected, and to really strengthen, to keep us within government, and to keep the AJP within government, and just grow the movement, because I don't consider this a job. It's a movement, and here we all are with our shared values. Our WA wins. This one was really important. It was just so terrific. I secured the inclusion of animal cruelty provisions in the Criminal Code, the Post and Boast Offence Bill 2025, which was initially instigated through hoon. It was going to be hoon driving, and how they were posting and boasting hoon cars. And once it actually came to the chamber, I started talking about the abuse of animals, and people literally acts of cruelty that people are boasting about online, and that resonated with the committee, and it resonated with everybody. And it was, incidentally, it was the One Nation guy that was in that committee that really drove the cruelty, acts of cruelty should be included in this bill. He was quite instrumental in that, and in supporting it, and it was included in the bill. And that was terrific, and that was without having to use our notice of motion to actually drive this officially. So this is what we can do, being in there now, and trying to strengthen and create those relationships with people that we wouldn't normally have anything in common with. I introduced the bill, the Chief Animal Protection Officer, which sits under the Independent Animal Welfare Amendment, the Chief Animal Protection Officer, which would sit under an independent office for animal protection. And this is a critical, this is one of our national policies as well. And so this will be debated later this year. Vedicare. Vedicare is that was first established, it was a concept established in Victoria, and it's affordable vet care for low-income earners, concession card holders, pensioners, wildlife carers, animal carers, and I received unanimous upper house support within the chamber for that to go to a committee process, which is where the greyhound inquiry is currently now. Coincidentally, that happened at the same time, and it happened through all the work of Free the Hounds. But to have Vedicare go to that same process, to a committee process, is the first step of hoping to get that legislated, because Vedicare will now be scrutinised through that committee process. And I worked hard I had Labor's support. It took a while to get Labor's support. In between negotiating with them, I was negotiating with the whole crossbench and the Liberal Party, and everybody agreed that this was a great idea. And then everybody unanimously voted for it. And then everybody stood up and had their own personalised story about their own companion animal and why this was important. And so that was really heartening to know that we've had some success in the 7 months since being elected. Now, change doesn't just happen without people, so we need you. So whoever isn't a member, it would be great. Join the party, because to remain registered as a political party, otherwise we become independents. So that's really what joining the party is about. Excuse me. And just joining the party, you don't have to do anything else. Join the party and then vote for us at election time, and that's focused activism, and that's all you need to do. But it keeps our numbers, and it keeps us registered as a political party. And today, in fact, if you join, you get a T-shirt. So if anybody wants to join the party, the girls, the folks over at the table at the AJP stall, they'll sign you up and you'll get a T-shirt. So I think that's incentive enough, isn't it? It's the members. As I said, also at 4 o'clock today, we'll have our AJP our AJP meeting, and it's the members that really drive the policies as well, because we're such a young political party. Everybody has input, and Bruce Poon, and everybody listens to Bruce listens to everybody, and and that changes, and that shapes our policies, and it shapes our position statements as well, based on everybody's opinion. Volunteering, focused activism, I've talked about that. You can do as much or as little as you want. If you want to volunteer, look at the amazing volunteers today that put this event together. If you'd like to help on the stalls or outreach, anything that you'd like to do, there's IT, there's different campaigns, admin, whatever your skill set is, we would always welcome volunteers. But you don't have to, don't feel obligated. Just joining the party and voting for us, and that's all you need to do. If that's all you want to do. So thank you. We want a better world for animals, people and the planet, and we're fighting for that change. And thank you to everybody for listening. Hey, it's Emma.
Wow, well done, Amanda. That's huge. It's absolutely huge, particularly given that you've only just stepped in. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present. I want to start by actually sharing a story, and most people actually haven't heard this story about me, but it's probably well over 20 years ago now. I had only just started my journey into animal rights, and I got an email saying, does anyone want to come over the weekend to help to protect some kangaroos? So I said, yep, I'll do that. And so I drove out to the ACT, met up in the middle of the night with a group of men who I had never met before, and we started scaling fences to enter the national park that was closed, and climbing over barbed wire fences. And I was told that our role was really to find the hunter that night and to hide from the ranger that was going to be looking for us. So we were actually walking towards the gunshots. So we were listening and walking closer and trying to find this hunter. Now, every other night that these guys had gone in, they said they've never found the hunter. And occasionally you'd see the spotlights coming towards you, and that was the headlights for the ranger. So you had to run off the path, fall into wombat holes, hide from the ranger. And that night we actually found the hunter. And so I was suddenly confronted by this truck with about a dozen headless kangaroos hanging from his truck. And the moment he saw us, he looked actually directly at me because I had a camera on me. And I started to take photos of him, and I started to take photos of the truck. And so he got back in his truck and he turned the truck around and he came straight for me. I was actually quite stuck. I was kind of very much at the corner of a pathway where I could jump off, which was a couple of metres, or get hit by his car. So I turned and I started running to try to get away from him, but obviously he was driving far too quickly for me to be able to do that. And I realised I was going to have to jump down the side of this thing, not knowing really how far it was going to be before I went down. But I was too slow. He hit me with his car. He dislocated my hip. And the police refused to charge him in that situation because he said that we were trespassing. And I've still got hip issues since then. But I remember for weeks after this, I was in so much pain, and I just remember thinking there's got to be a better way that we can actually go out there and protect animals. And look, I'm not against direct action. I believe that strategic direct action really has a place in this world, but it probably wasn't the right space for me. But I needed to find the right space for me to be able to feel like I'm actually out there doing something for animals. And so I was really lucky 7 years ago when I got to run for the Animal Justice Party and managed to get elected on a political platform for animals. And so I thought I'd take this moment just to run through some of the wins that we've been able to get in New South Wales since I was elected 7 years ago. And I think that's going to take my whole time because my team and the state office and all our members and volunteers, not just in New South Wales, but I know that other states often get involved with some of the campaigns we're running too. That's how we've managed to get this list of wins. So when I first got elected, in New South Wales, we had some of the weakest penalties for animal cruelty right across the country. There was cases where people were being fined as little as $6 for harming a hen and causing that hen to die. We got 8-fold increases in penalties and we doubled the jail time. And the government's now told me that they're going to bring on another bill to increase the penalties even more. We now have, we've gone from having some of the lowest penalties to some of the highest penalties right across the country. And even though we've still got this issue of trying to make sure that the magistrates actually apply those penalties, it sends a really strong message to the public and it sends a strong message to the courts that this is a high-level cruelty offence. These are high-level offences. These are very strong laws, and we take animal cruelty extremely seriously. We also changed the apprehended domestic violence orders to ensure that you could actually get an animal under an ADVO, so an animal could be protected. We also made sure that the link between animal abuse and human abuse was actually recognised in the legislation. And when the coercive control bill came through Parliament, we added in animals into that as well to recognise that animals are often used as a form of coercive control in domestic violence situations. And we also got a whole lot of money from the former coalition government, when they were in government, to shelters, to actually make sure we upgraded shelters so that people who are leaving violent situations can actually take their animals with them when they're getting into emergency accommodation. We also got bans for people who had been found guilty of different forms of animal cruelty. Before I was elected, can you imagine that somebody could be found guilty of a charge like bestiality and a week later go out and actually go and buy a dog? This is how poor our legislation was before the Animal Justice Party was elected. A lot of this stuff sometimes feels like low-hanging fruit, but the question is, why was no other politician doing this work before we got in there? So we got bans for people who have higher level cruelty offences and sexual abuses against animals as well. We changed the strata rules. We found this awful situation where a man who actually owned his own apartment, the strata made a new rule that you cannot have animals within your strata complexes. This was during COVID. So this elderly man was told that he would have to sell his house and find somewhere else to live or get rid of his beloved dog. So instead of that, we changed the law so that stratas couldn't do blanket bans on people being able to have animals. We then got the Environment Minister, after we did an inquiry into the use of cetaceans in animals in entertainment, and we got a new rule to make sure that we would not have any more cetaceans here in entertainment. So talking about dolphins, whales, where you see those places, SeaWorld, for example, we do have, unfortunately, one facility in Coffs Harbour that still has 3 dolphins, which Bailey and my team are doing a lot of work on, but they are the last dolphins that will be in New South Wales. They cannot breed them. They cannot get dolphins from other states. SeaWorld cannot set up in New South Wales. We banned... We banned bestiality and crush videos. If you don't know what a crush video is, please do not search it. In fact, it would be illegal for you to do so because we made it illegal for you to do so. But it is a fetish animal cruelty video. But it was legal in New South Wales to possess, to produce and to distribute these videos. It's not anymore. We then also introduced our own. After we did that, we were contacted by police that work in this space, in the Child Sex Crimes Unit, that said that the legislation's still not up to scratch. So we introduced another bill, which we passed, which changed the term bestiality to animal sexual abuse, because we want to recognise the animals as the victims in this situation, and we expanded the definition. And I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to sort of do a trigger warning, but essentially the definition was so narrow that it really required it to be penetrative only. And so we made sure that the definition of animal sexual abuse is much broader. We changed the working with children's check system. So again, can you imagine, before we were elected into Parliament, somebody could be found guilty for bashing a dog and then working the next day in a childcare centre. My background is as a psychologist, and we know that there is a link between people who harm animals and who harm children as well. So we changed the working with children's check system so that if you're charged with some of these offences, you can no longer work or volunteer with children. And we also got some money for the authorities who are actually going in and investing animal cruelty cases to actually understand when they're walking into a domestic violence situation as well and where to act. We also found out that because most of these cases were being charged by the RSPCA and the Animal Welfare League, they had no communication system with the police. And so even when people were being charged with those higher level offences that should have been trigger offences originally, that was never being communicated to the police for those police checks to get a working with children's check. So that's all been fixed now as well. I also worked with a wonderful activist who many of you might know, Emma Huckinson from Victoria. And so she's a survivor of child sexual abuse. And so we also are mandating training here in New South Wales to get a working with children's check. And that's really to arm safe adults with knowing what to do when they actually suspect that a child may be being harmed. We banned convenience killing in pounds. So during COVID lockdowns, we heard about a horrific situation where a mother dog and her puppies were actually shot in a pound, despite 2 rescue organisations contacting the pound and saying that they would take them and rehome them. And we heard that there were a lot of pounds in New South Wales that are actually built into tip sites so that the dogs and the cats can come in, they can euthanise them and put them straight into the tip. So we changed the rules so that they have to attempt to rehome every single animal. They have minimum holding times for each of those animals to provide them an opportunity, and they have to contact at least 2 rescue organisations before they euthanise that animal as well. We did a working with animals bill, so I talked about working with children, but of course we also don't want animal abusers working with animals, which again seems like something fairly obvious. So we wrote our own piece of legislation and banned many people from being able to actually work in animal industries if they have been found guilty of animal cruelty offences. We passed another bill called the Right to Release Bill, and this was one of my favourite bills. Before I was actually elected into Parliament, I was rehoming animals from medical experimentation, and we got the first dog out on the night of my inaugural speech, and we couldn't get cats and dogs out. And when I spoke to researchers, they said, we don't want the public to know that we're using cats and dogs in medical experimentation, and so we kill them rather than rehome them to be able to keep that secret. So I put up a bill. That dog, just by luck, was actually adopted by somebody who's run many times for the Liberal Party in New South Wales. And so she came into Parliament. We told everyone we've got this wonderful dog in my office. We even got the Shooters Party to come down and meet the dog. And the next day I said, by the way, I've got this bill today. And everyone supported it. Even the Shooters Party ended up supporting that bill. And I think that applause was for Buddy, who was obviously the one that really got everyone across the line on that one. But it also really exposed this whole industry that has been so hidden for so long. After the first term of Parliament, we set up an animal welfare committee. So we only have 4 overarching committees within Parliament that look into things like law and order, child welfare, and I made sure we set up a brand new one that was able to do a whole lot of inquiries specifically into animal welfare. And so that way, going forward, we make sure that animal inquiries still have a place to go no matter what happens. Our state office, thank you. Our state office also ran a major campaign after Gus the blue groper was killed by a spearfisher, and there was major media coverage of this, and we ended up being successful in convincing the New South Wales government to ban the killing of blue gropers, and most recently that ban was extended even further for many more years going into the future. After that, we passed another bill to outlaw forced swim and smoking experiments. In forced swim experiments, animals are dropped into a bucket or a beaker of water and they are drowned. And this is so-called depression research. And I can tell you as a former psychologist, an animal trying to survive has absolutely nothing to do with a chronic human condition like depression. And in smoking experiments, animals are put into like tubes, and cigarette smoke is forcibly pumped into their nostrils. So we banned both of these experiments. And the really great thing about this bill was that we are the first in the entire world to ban these experiments. And there are places all around the world that have been trying to ban it. And now we're getting contacted overseas and interstate to say, how did you do it? And we are finally in New South Wales being used as an example for overseas. And there have been further bans since we've done that first here in New South Wales.
Yay. Yay.
Just quickly, we've also banned glue traps, dogs in hot cars, prong collars. We worked with Amazon to stop selling wildlife unsafe fruit netting and escar poisons, which are extremely cruel and killing our owls. We've got another major company that we're working with now, and I hope to have more announcements on that very soon. We've got a wildlife roads trial being rolled out by the government with agreement and working with them. We finally outlawed puppy farming in New South Wales, so the intensive factory farming of dogs for the pet trade industry. And we knew that there were places in New South Wales with 600 female dogs forced to pump out litter after litter for her entire life. That is now finally illegal here in New South Wales. We blocked a move by the Shooters Party in the last term of Parliament to get toddlers hunting licences, as absolutely absurd as that sounds. And most of last year we were fighting against the Shooters Party to weaken gun laws and to encourage more hunting of animals. We have finally taken that bill down. We passed a bill that allowed joint burials with animals. And so if you've got the remains of your animals, your beloved companions, in New South Wales, there was no law that actually allowed you to be buried with your companion animals. That has now changed. In the introduction, I think it said we've got over $60 million. We actually need to update our introduction because we've actually got over $100 million for animals in New South Wales. And I often think, we would never have, or I would never have $100 million to be able to donate. But when we get somebody in Parliament, when we can get governments to actually pay attention to some of these programs, and we've got money for rescue organisations, farmed animal rescue has even got some money, wombat mange, getting animals out of medical experimentation. We've got about $7 million to rehome some of those animals coming out of medical experimentation, but also to find alternatives to the use of animals in medical experimentation as well. So we're passing more bills and more amendments than anybody else in Parliament. And I think that's really because we've got, I'm one MP, but I've got an entire community that's working with us and with our office and with our state office behind the scenes. And so, we've got one MP, but we've got the energy of several thousand people behind that. And that's how we have managed to be so much more successful than all these other minor parties. For the rest of this year, before the election, our next biggest thing is getting up the Independent Office of Animal Protection. And this is so important because at the moment, the reason why we can't ban battery cages, the reason why we can't stop sow stalls and why there's exemptions to extreme acts of cruelty in these industries is because the Department of Agriculture holds the animal welfare portfolio. And so it is being dictated to us by these industries, and the Agriculture Minister has this major conflict of interest, and they end up picking the side of industry over all the science and animal welfare. So we need to create separation, and we need to change how the system works before we can get some of these major wins. And so I believe we're going to get the independent office this year in New South Wales, or probably the first in Australia. We'll also be working to get rid of balloon releases. It's insane that, if you put a piece of plastic on the ground, you can get charged, but if you throw it into the air, that's perfectly legal. We know that it ends up in the oceans and kills many of our animals. I am doing an inquiry into licences to harm native animals, and I'm not making up that term, that's actually what they're called. And we're hearing some fantastic evidence coming forward there, and I know that the Labor government's going to be reviewing that system, and so we can really try to make sure that all these hundreds of thousands of licences killing our beautiful native animals is no longer a thing. We're also looking at custody orders for people who are leaving domestic violence situations, so that when they're going through the ADVO process, they can actually get a custody order for those animals, and so that they are going with the safe home. And we've also got a lot of work happening on the use of primates in medical experimentation, and a lot more happening in the greyhound space as well, which I can't say much about right now, but other than to say that there's a lot more to come. So look, our party really is here to change things. I strongly believe that this is one avenue where we can get some really, really big changes. I know there's a lot of work being done in other spaces and working with corporations, but when we can actually change the laws, where we can actually make sure that there's money being funded in the right places, it's so, so important. Some of these wins, like I say, they sound like, that they're so obvious. Why weren't they done before? The answer why they weren't done before is because the Animal Justice Party wasn't elected into Parliament before, and animal protection as an issue was being entirely neglected. There is still so much more work that we need to do. So thank you to each and every one of you. I've got one more year, then we're back up for re-election. So we really need as many members, volunteers, people involved as possible, because we don't want this to be the end of the list. We know that there is so much more to do. So thank you.
Wow. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so
We might get through that.
for sure.
So I'd actually just like to point out something. I don't know if you saw it in Emma's post the other day that there was some troll who came in and, paraphrasing, said, "So what have you done?" Please give her another big round of applause. So suck that, troll. And we've got all this on video. I'd like to send it to him. Now, folks, we're actually going to do some Q&A. So Carl, when he comes back out, and I will... Oh, he's up the back. We have 2 microphones. We will get as many questions in as we can before this finishes. How are you, Bailey? So, yeah, just if you put your hands up, we'll get the mics to you.
Emma, thank you for all of the work that you do. We're grateful about you championing this cause for us. And this is, we know that you fight harder than anyone else that could possibly could. But I'm curious to know about the ones where we haven't won. The Brumbies, the Olivia pig. I'm just curious if you can share. We would love to know about the ones that we would have loved to have a different result on.
Trying to hear. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your question, and thank you for all the work that you're doing for animals as well. I often don't know how people do the one-on-one care for animals in sanctuary, so thank you so much. And that work is long and hard and very difficult, so thank you. Yes, there has been some losses. And so, look, each one, there's always a strategy to how we won, and then it's the strategy and then, you know, how we fail as well. And it's always different. So in regards to the Brumbies, it was always going to be extremely difficult because we didn't have the Liberals, we didn't have Labor, and we didn't have the Greens. They were all very much for the killing of these Brumbies. I did manage to get the Liberals across the line to push for an inquiry. So I did chair that inquiry through the Animal Welfare Committee, and it really helped lift the lid in regards to what was really happening here. They were shooting during foaling season. They were shooting these animals multiple times, multiple body shot wounds found on these animals. And so it was really quite extreme. We had statistical experts coming to give evidence that, you know, the number of Brumbies was being grossly exaggerated as well. And look, I have a background in statistics, but you don't really need a background in statistics when you actually hear how bizarre it was. So to be able to apply a particular statistical model, you need to have a certain amount in your raw data. They didn't have that. So they took the number of Brumbies that they count. So they go up in their helicopters and they count the Brumbies. And they didn't have enough Brumbies to apply this model. So they added the number of Brumbies from this count and one from another previous year and then applied the model. Right? Like it's just like you don't need a statistical degree to know that makes everything totally invalid. But this is kind of an example of when nobody's really looking into something and they get away with it. And so, look, we fought hard. We had a few other MPs on side, particularly around the National Party. But ultimately, and we were trying to sort of filibuster it out. And we had a really difficult last 3 weeks of the term last year. And, the Greens voted with Labor to lift the heart adjournment to force it through. And so what that means is you have to actually stay in Parliament. You can't leave. You can't really go to eat. You can't go to the toilet. You can't have a coffee. So we were there, we started the day at 10 a.m. We finished at 3 a.m. the next morning. But essentially it makes a filibuster kind of useless because at some point we all collapse and that's all we can do. And so we did fight hard against that one. We did try to get a lot of media. It was very, very difficult to do. So that's how we lost that one. I think it was just me and the Nats in the end, and a couple of the independents that were fighting against that one. In regards to, what was the other one you asked about? The Olivia the pig. This was a piece of legislation. So Olivia the pig was the victim of animal sexual abuse in Victoria. we have extreme ag-gag laws here in New South Wales. They are so extreme. There are gagging laws that if you have undercover footage of animal cruelty, you cannot even report it to the police. You cannot even report it to the RSPCA. So if what happened to Olivia happened in New South Wales, it would still be happening because the activists that got that undercover footage couldn't give it to the police couldn't accept it, and they can't use it in any way for an investigation. That's how extreme our laws are. We campaigned, we finally got Labor to agree to wind that bit back. I also wanted them to give the media a public interest exemption. If something's in the public interest, the media should be allowed to report on it. That was just me. No one supported that. So it's just the Animal Justice Party fighting for that one. But I did have Labor on side for at least being able to send it to the authorities. We lost that one by the vote of the Greens. So they were concerned, I believe, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting them, but I believe their position was that they were worried that somebody could be filmed undercover in a protest, and that footage could then, and if they did something illegal at an illegal protest, that could be used by the police. But our concern is, I mean, it's animals, but it's also childcare centres, it's also elder abuse at nursing homes. Any undercover footage can't go to the authorities, and so we just think people are too vulnerable that this can't go to the police. The Labor Party are going to bring the same bill back on, and so we're really campaigning hard to try to get, we also didn't have legalised cannabis on site, so we're trying to sort of get some of those numbers over, or at least the Liberal Party or somebody to try to get it through. So that fight's not over.
Oh, we got a question over there.
Yeah, Emma and Amanda, thank you very much for your talks. It's really great to hear the strengths of the party and what it can achieve after hearing so much bad news on animals. My question is around the protection of cats. And I know that there was an inquiry last year. I certainly made a submission to that, and there was a kind of there was a win, but there were also lots of things that went unattended to or postponed to a later date. I hear your success with the puppy farms, and I'm wondering if there are any attempts at addressing similar issues with regard to cats, because certainly I've heard from many cat owners and also registered cat breeders about the registered and unregistered cat breeders who are doing just as awful a situation with cats that often go unrepresented.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so we did a really good inquiry into the cat management in New South Wales. Interestingly, we did try to get an amendment to the puppy farm bill for kitten farming, and that got voted down. But I just had the National Party oddly reach out to me wanting to talk about it, so I think we might be able to actually get them across the line on something like that in regards to kitten farming. But then we've also got this broader issue of backyard breeding, and that's for both dogs and cats. And so we've been bringing that up again with the Minister. I spoke to the Leader of the Opposition actually about that just this week as well. So there's so much to do in this space, and we've also got the threat of this cat containment bill in New South Wales. And to explain that to people, I have a cat, he's 20, I keep him entirely contained in my home. I believe that we should be keeping our animals inside, particularly cats who are a risk to wildlife. But what we heard at the inquiry, and we heard this from the Australian Veterinary Association, we heard this from RSPCA New South Wales, that mandating cat containment doesn't work. And it doesn't work because people can't afford catios. Our rental system in New South Wales can require landlords to keep your cats outside. It really affects and displaces those people who are on lower incomes and who are struggling already. If their cat escapes and gets outside, their cat ends up in the pound. They can't afford the fees to get that cat back. That cat gets euthanised. And what we have found in other states where they've introduced these laws, euthanasia rates have gone through the roof. We've got a veterinary shortage. Vets have one of the highest suicide rates in the world. The vets that I'm friends with are saying this is why, because we don't want to go in and euthanize these healthy animals because of this pound system and the fact that this has been ignored for so long. A lot of people don't have their cats microchipped or registered. They don't even realise that that's against the law. And then, of course, we've got all these community cats, which people are going out dissecting and feeding and trying to help. Under these laws, every single one of them would have to be killed by the council because they can't be contained. So we're just not ready for a cat containment law which is punitive against people. There is so much work we need to do before we can even consider some of that legislation. We need to get them microchipped, we need to get them all dissected, we need to get them off the street, we need to make sure our pounds aren't overrun, our rescues aren't overrun, who are doing all this work, usually missing their own dinners, for example, and own food for their family because they're trying to do this work on behalf of governments which they've ignored for so long. I think that sort of really came up through that inquiry, and there's so much work that we need to do there. So we're trying to make sure that government doesn't sort of take the easy way out to say, like, here's, because they're not going to do that legislation and fund these other programs. They're looking for a way to do it where they don't have to put any money towards anything and to say they've fixed the problem. We know that this isn't going to fix the problem, so we need to make sure that that's really clear and that the government continues to fund all these programs where people are being educated, encouraged to keep their cats inside, desexing those cats, microchipping those cats, getting them off the street as much as possible. So it's a big piece of work, and it's something we continue to discuss with the relevant ministers.
And we have
One more question, Emma. Emma, over here. This is in relation to animal cruelty, the prosecution of or investigation of. RSPCA, of course, is the main body. I mean, we have Animal Welfare League as well, but just on my little AI figures here, RSPCA received 900,000 animal cruelty reports in 2025, according to AI, but they whittled it down to saying it's probably about 60,000. Now, the RSPCA has 40 inspectors, so you divide 900,000 by 40, and it comes out that each inspector technically has 22,000 cases to investigate. So my point is that New South Wales Police, under the POCTA Act, are recognised as inspectors, so there's no legislative changes required. Is there any way that we can get New South Wales to Police, as you're trying to get an independent animal officer, if you can get New South Wales Police to create an animal investigation team to work beside RSPCA as joint stakeholders? I have known some RSPCA inspectors personally. I'm not a fan of the RSPCA, I'll put that on record, but they also have a very hard job where they go to places and they have no intelligence of the how dangerous the people are inside, if there's any risks, if they are people known to carry weapons. So they're trying to do the best of their job, and they often, because there's only 40, have to rock up to a place by themselves. So I just don't understand why New South Wales Police has 16,000 police officers that are technically authorised inspectors, and why we can't make New South Wales Police step up to the mark. And I'm a police officer myself, and I'm known as the animal police officer when people come to the station. And police are very slack at doing their job because they are overworked and they're going to a protest every day. And if you worked out how much taxpayers' money is being used to police all these protests and that, why can't some money go towards setting up an animal cruelty investigation with joint stakeholders? That's all.
It's a good question, and we have... we have had discussions in regards to this in the past, and one of the other major issues with the police taking on this work is the fact that the police don't have the infrastructure to seize and house animals for those prosecution cases. And so we need, like, first of all, the police sort of say that they're under-resourced already and they're already overstretched, and so it's hard to sort of get them out for these cases. But then once there's animals in these cases, if they walk into a puppy farm situation, there's 100 dogs that suddenly need to be seized. They've got nowhere to put them. The other problem that the authorities often complain to me about is that they have to hold these animals through most of the prosecution, and some of these prosecutions can take 2 years. So if you've got 100 dogs and you're charging them for cruelty for every single one of those animals, and then, you know, anybody that works in rescues knows that you can't keep a dog in a kennel situation for 2 years. They'll get kennel rage and then you can't rehome them anyway. And so they've got to try and get these specialist foster carers. Often they're under protective situations because they don't want those animals to get stolen by whoever committed that act of cruelty on them. And so it's actually really complicated when there's actual animals involved. I think it's wonderful to get the police out there, and certainly the police have the skills and the know-how to prosecute cases of cruelty. But then we've still got this problem of, you know, these animals oddly are kind of evidence because they can't give a statement and then go home. You know, their body is still evidence throughout this whole entire case. And a lot of people say, well, I'm pleading not guilty and I'm going to take that animal back when I'm shown to be not guilty. So that's why they can't rehome them. So it's a really difficult space. When I first started, I think the RSPCA was getting $850,000 to do all of this work. They're now getting about $12 million, just over $12 million a year to do this work. And it's still... the government's still refusing to cover the cost of veterinary care for these animals, vehicles for staff, for the ongoing housing cost of these animals while prosecutions are underway. And so I suspect the problem that we're seeing is a lot of these charities, and they are charities upholding animal cruelty legislation, which is a bizarre situation in the first place, are having to choose which cases to take on because they've only got limited resources to how many animals they can hold for these cruelty cases. And so we're only seeing, you know, the top end of these cruelty cases actually ending up in prosecutions. So, yeah, there's a lot that we need to do, and I'm hoping that once we can set up an independent Office of Animal Welfare, we can better work out a way to deal with that, because I think the bigger issue is that animal protection has always been set up to fail. When you hand out like the responsibility for criminal legislation to a private charity and give them no money to do so, it's always going to fail. And then that body is also overseen, and their legal right to be able to do that is signed off by the Agriculture Minister, who again has this major conflict of interest, you know, and is too heavily influenced by industry that doesn't want to be prosecuted for animal cruelty. So, you know, it's this whole cycle of, and I think it's because we've been missing in politics for so long, that, you know, this has been set up by industry entirely to fail from the beginning. And so now we're coming in and having to like pull pieces out to try to unravel that whole system. And so, yes, I agree with you, but I think we need to do the independent office first, and then we can kind of work out how do we get the police more involved in this? How do we get resources for the police involved in this so that maybe they're doing the prosecutions and investigations and working with these charities who then take the animals and work directly next to the police in that way.
Yes, we got another question up the back here.
Well, so you two are really the tip of the spear when it comes to our movement, and we are all so grateful for you. And I know just how much you have to see every day, how difficult it is, how all-consuming it can be. What is the thing that we can do to support you, to help avoid burnout, to just show you that you're supported in this very difficult role? And I don't mean just signing up to be members of AJP. I know. But what is it? What do you need? What does your office need? Can we post more positive comments? Like, what is it that raises morale in your sphere that we can do to try to help boost you in your work?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Emma. That's a great question. Look, personally, I meditate, and I find that very grounding, and I find that really helps. And but yeah, the positive comments online, definitely. I've got a great team behind me, and Ruth is amazing as a media liaison. She's fantastic with the social media, and I don't read the comments. I know that Georgie really cops It's really abusive. I can't cope with that. So I'll have a cursory sort of look at the posts and whatnot, but maybe from a mercenary sort of perspective, but it's not really, I avoid social media. I really do. And, if it wasn't for the team, I wouldn't have it. I forget to take photos. I forget to upload. I just kind of want to be in the moment instead of taking so yeah, but definitely keep the positiveness and keep upbeat. It's just having everybody here, and joining the party is huge, because otherwise we become independents if suddenly the party falls apart, because we are really quite a minor party, and you get a free t-shirt. That would lift my spirits.
Yeah, the T-shirt's everything. It really is.
Exactly. Emma, did you?
Look, the only thing I'd probably add to that is, I don't want people to also then drown in those comments either, because I don't want you guys to get pulled down by some of it in the same way. But if you do see something, to just call it out, I think is always really helpful, particularly if it's men, which it often is, particularly for the really awful comments that Georgie and I get. Having other men sort of call it out, I think is really powerful, and I think that's what we really like to see is people saying, actually, that's not okay, and really, particularly when it's inciting violence, when it's sexual harassment, or even just bordering in those areas. All of us just sort of calling it out. I know sometimes I've been onto some of my pages, and I've seen some wonderful people arguing with somebody putting an awful comment, and then I've called them out, like the original commenter, and they've deleted their comment, so they don't like to be called out. So yeah.
I think that's one thing that you can also do is report the trolls, because if the more people who report them, they will get banned. So don't be afraid to report them. And also, if you don't want to get into an argument with a troll, a friend of mine, Anthony, who will be doing a presentation tomorrow morning, she says, go in there, hit strike, then turn off the notifications for that post. So go in there, hit them hard, then just don't read their responses. So that's a really great way that you can support these guys. We've got time for one more question. And I've got two hands.
Hi, is there a particular animal rights issue that you feel like is under the radar, or we're not really talking about or discussing enough?
It's a good question.
I go with crocodile farming in the Northern Territory.
Crocodile farming is a big one.
We don't have any representation in the Northern Territory. Sorry, Emma.
I just jumped in, sorry about that. I mean, the crocodile farming in the Northern Territory, Emma Harkinson is really championing that campaign. We don't have anybody representing it in Darwin, so, that's just appalling what's happening there. Do you have an
Livestock shade. I think that overall, I think that at the moment there's a really difficult discussion around animal cruelty generally, and I think that people are feeling very burnt out. And it's not just the animal space, but we're seeing wars, we're seeing terrorist attacks in Bondi, we're seeing Epstein files coming out. People are really on edge at the moment. People are living in fear. People are really concerned about what's happening in the US. And I think when we start talking about animal cruelty, people are tuning out generally because it's becoming too much for many people. And so I would say rather than there being sort of one issue that sort of we're not talking, it's about how do we continue to make sure that, because the thing is we need to kind of work on all of this. We need to fight against racism. We need to fight against, all the women being killed in the country and what's happening there. We need to make sure we're protecting children from sexual abuse, and we need to make sure that that animal cruelty, I heard from the authorities recently, animal cruelty is on the rise, and the cruelty cases are becoming more extreme than they ever have before. And so there's this real real societal twist at the moment where, you know, the two extremes are getting more extreme, and we need, like, the people in this room and all of us to stay strong, and to make sure that, you know, we stay strong on all of it. We can't sort of forget that there's animals, you know, hidden in factory farms that are being gassed in slaughterhouses, that are having the most horrific things happen to them. They're getting mutilated without pain relief. There are so many issues, and rather than being overwhelmed by that, we need to recognise that actually we're really at a societal shift at the moment. In the same way that people are becoming more fearful, we're also seeing a real growing body of people who are becoming more compassionate and trying to work out how do we actually heal the world at the moment with so much awful things going on. And so we just need to make sure that we're part of that.
Great response.
So, my bad. I thought we were finishing at 1:30, but we're finishing at 1:45. So, we have more time for questions. Do we have more questions happening? Over there, we got 2 questions. Okay.
Hi, Emma. I just want to say thank you so much for your recent coverage on Channel 7 as a greyhound advocate. It was wonderful. I've got a greyhound, and I was just telling this gentleman I was very proud that I was instrumental in bringing Rob Macaulay down. And because my dear dog Fluffy, who's actually a black male greyhound, was nearly put down at his hands when the YE facility closed. And when all the people got the sack up there, and it was closed down, and the greyhounds were shipped out to America and also to the universities for research and put down. So my dog would have been a casualty. I was on my way back from Doha, and I caught him just in time, one day. So, you know, stick to your guns, go through your fear and go for it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think Amanda might be able to talk a bit about what's happening in greyhounds in her state too. You've got some movement there too, don't you? But I'll just say, sorry, before I bring her on. I mean, there is so much happening. And what I will say is I've got about a dozen whistleblowers now within the industry. And they're having emergency meetings almost every night, apparently saying that if any of you are speaking to Emma Hurst's office, you'll be fired, you'll never work again in the state. And then they ring me up and let me know that that's what was discussed at the meeting. There is just so much, I don't even know where to begin. We exposed the other day this guy that was charged with animal sexual abuse offences working on one of the Dubbo tracks. He's still working there. We exposed live baiting again. There's a man that's being investigated and charged for live baiting charges. We did a story with Channel 7 on that last week. We're hearing, people very high up in the organisation that had sexual harassment allegations made against them. It's just ongoing. Another very senior person, allegations that were apparently caught on CCTV of him beating his dog just recently. And it just keeps going. New drug allegations have come to me just this week as well. So it's one of these industries that you can just see it's going to start to crumble very quickly, and I think we're getting there. We've got a Liberal opposition and a Labor Party who are resistant to change anything, but I don't think they're going to have a choice at some point. The way that this industry is reacting and is behaving, and what they're actually doing to these dogs.
Sorry, and you've got some more exciting news.
Yeah, thanks very much, Emma. I think all the work that's being done with the greyhounds is thanks to Free the Hounds and Mel Harrison and their team. We get all of our information from them and all the work that they've been doing for years. And it was just a cumulative effect of us getting elected and then that inquiry happening. But really, it had nothing to do with the Animal Justice Party. It was really from Free the Hounds. So I would suggest, everybody should listen to the Talking Couch Potatoes podcast for everything that's happening in WA with greyhounds. Yeah. So, yeah.
But it's exciting, and it's exciting that you're in while that's
Oh,
happening.
and now that we're actually in and we're pushing for it and we're following the guidance of how this, because we're so close, and so all the hard work that Free the Hounds has been doing, you know, I certainly didn't want to destroy any of that by marching into Parliament and saying let's ban this. We want to phase out so all the dogs can be rehomed, and yeah, and it was like Emma said, it's a matter of once it actually starts to fall, the industry has to crumble. It just has to. It's just so close, and to have that happen in WA, as Mel said earlier, that would definitely have a domino effect for every other state as well, and to follow obviously what's happening in Tasmania. So it's really exciting. Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, coming from America, when I discovered the Animal Justice Party, it was the greatest day of my life, because as we know, we have a no party system in America, or a single party system. But I wanted to know if you could talk about the anti-protest laws that are starting to creep into our country, which are very scary, following what's going on in America with ICE and just, you know, the cracking down on free speech, basically.
Do you have anything going on in your state?
We do. We have a bill. We have the same thing happening in Western Australia as well, based on what's happened recently in Sydney. So yeah, I can't. Yeah, the briefings with the minister, and I'm new to the role, and so I'm sort of learning as much as possible and just trying to, I guess, fit in and. In situations that don't affect animals so much, but our right to protest and peaceful protest as well, we'll follow the Greens on that, or follow our allies within Parliament and follow how they're going to vote and support that. But yeah, we need to protect that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, we've had an ongoing battle in New South Wales in regards to the right to protest, and it's very, very difficult. There is an interesting thing that sometimes happens in the upper house. So we've got, you know, the two major parties, the Labor and the Coalition, and then we've got this very colourful crossbench is probably the nicest way to explain it. You know, we've got everywhere from the shooters to the Animal Justice Party and everything in between. And when these laws come up, the entire crossbench almost unanimously votes against them. And you've got the two major parties using their numbers to vote in favour for it, even though a lot of their members will get up and speak against these laws. The issue that it's creating is that people aren't going to stop protesting anyway. People are just going to protest illegally, and then they're going to get out of hand. And protests are now becoming bigger, they're becoming angrier because of this attempt to silence to silence the community. And it's something that, you know, we've been faced with for a long time. There was anti-protest laws being attempted to be pushed in, you know, since I have been elected. And there's been a chipping away of our rights as citizens within New South Wales. So I mean, essentially, these major parties, they don't like dissent, they don't like to be held to account, and so if they can silence that, you know, when I first started, they were trying to get rid of environmental protests, and so the big focus was, you know, shutting down these environmental activists that were trying to get attention and desperately saying, you know, our world is burning, young people coming forward and saying, we don't have a future in this country, we don't have a future in this world unless you stop doing these things, and they wanted to silence that. And so, and we're seeing the same thing now, and what's being done by these governments is they are using awful, hideous events as an excuse to shut down voices rather than actually trying to find solutions and protect communities. You know, it's not the protests that are causing violence.
So we have another question over the back there.
Yes, it's me again. I just want to refer back to something you were saying earlier, which is, you know, we're at a time in our existence, if you like, in which we're witnessing so much horror in every area, or just about every area of life, as well as, you know, cost of living crisis, etc. and that it would be very easy for us to be demoralised or frozen really into inaction at a time in which, in fact, animal cruelty seems to be rising from what you were saying. But I'm wondering, there is a population group that is not at risk of that right now, and that's young people, meaning, children who are still at school and in the early, so late, as late as high school and perhaps early years of bachelor degrees, who could be brought into, I don't want to say signed up for the party, but you know what I mean? Like, is there enough education in these age groups among school children? What is our capacity and your capacity as a party of perhaps going into school systems, etc.? Because I think that the younger people are still unaffected. It's not that they're ignoring it, but they're not as affected as the rest of us by these bigger horrors, and that there is the possibility of ushering in a new generation of people that, because the vast majority of us are usually volunteers, but I think that there's room for having actual work and proper jobs and proper sectors that do work a lot more with animals for animals rather than just the pet food industry. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, and look, I think it's a really important, thank you, and it's a really important sort of aspect and an area of outreach, and I think that there is a real disconnect from politics because we've had so many unsavoury characters involved in politics. And so I'm sure all of us have known someone that goes, I don't want to have anything to do with politics. And I get it because I know I spend a lot of time around many of these unsavoury characters. But that's the great thing about the Animal Justice Party is we're just real people. Yeah. We're not sort of anything, we haven't been... I mean, I certainly wasn't spending my life wanting to become a politician. I don't think probably Amanda was either. But it's so important that we get, real people actually into politics. And that's going to more engage young people as well, because I think that a lot of young people too, they look at politics and they roll their eyes and they go, well, and a lot of them see these people don't care. They don't care about climate change. They don't care about many of the issues that they're facing. And that's where it's really great to have someone like Georgie as well, a much younger MP that can also reach out to younger people as well and to say, well, actually, we need your voices in Parliament and we need you to be part of it. But yes, unfortunately, kind of like from a resourcing point of view, we're really tight. I get 2 staff and we have to be across every piece of legislation that comes through Parliament. We have to do the same work as some of these major parties with a group of 3 people. And then we've got a tiny little state office who does have a young age AP as part of, because we do see the importance of that. And I think it would be great probably to have a conversation directly with Natasha about that further, to sort of talk about how do we get young age AP to kind of really reach out and to expand and to grow, because yes, I think we've got a future pool of voters there that maybe aren't sort of maybe living in the same amount of fear, but who are looking for a way to change. And the only way we can change is if we get out of these systems of this 2-party system, which just aren't working, which keep the status quo, which is not helping anyone.
So I might just add to that, your question about getting it into schools and education into schools. I actually work for Vegan Australia, and that's been my job, is creating vegan education programs for high schools. So I've developed a whole range of lesson plans, everything free downloadable for teachers to take into schools. So if there are any teachers here or people who know teachers, we all do, please let them know. It's on the Vegan Australia website and it's all completely free. Lots of different lesson plans, idioms that will change animal cruelty idioms into cruelty-free idioms, and also student clubs, getting students to work like a vegan student club. You don't have to call it a vegan student club, but it's to encourage people to come in. Students don't have to be vegan. And the one thing I'd like to point out is everybody knows Mercy for Animals. Mercy for Animals started off as a student club. So I think this is something that we can be taking into schools as well. Sorry to jump on your... So folks, after my little rant, that means our time is up in here. But could you please say thank you to these 2 amazing ladies?